So once you've enrolled your devices, you'll want to know what devices you have. It's not terribly challenging in my trial network. You can see on the devices overview page, I've got 4 devices in total, 2 running Windows and 1 running Android and 1 running iOS iPadOS. Not a significant number, but you'll want to be able to, especially if you've got a large number of devices, review the information in a more convenient manner. And there are a number of reporting tools that you can do to get information or get access about your device inventory. But even on the overview page in the Intune console, or rather on the devices node of the Intune console, you've got enrollment status, enrollment alerts, compliance status, configuration status, and software update status, enrollment failures, Intune enrolled devices, top enrollment failures this week, and so on. None of that's relevant here. I don't have any information to display because I have so few activities being performed, but you'll get a lot more on a live network. If you go down and select specific devices, you can get a bit more information. And from the all devices list, you've got the option to filter and select different columns of information, and then to export that information out to a CSV, which you can then utilize in some other area like Power BI or in an Excel spreadsheet or some other graphical tool. The filter options are fairly straightforward. Once you select filter, a flyout window appears on the right, and you can specify options like managed by, device action, category. Remember what I said about categories earlier? It can be beneficial, but it also can be erroneous if users aren't quite sure which category to pick. Ownership, compliance status, jailbroken operating system, last check-in date ranges, and so on. There's lots of things that you can configure for your reports. With 4 devices to worry about, it's not a big deal, but with 4,000 devices to worry about, this is a significant help. Once you've selected what you want to filter, you can then export using export data for all managed devices. Either you can choose to include the selected columns or include all inventory data in the exported file, depending on what you want to have. When you want to perform management of your devices, you can do that through the Intune console. Obviously, that's what it's for. And the options that you have will vary based on the operating system that you're talking to and the state of the device. But typically, you can perform a retirement. A retire removes the device from management scope and removes all company data from the device. It leaves personal data. But in essence, I suppose, then the device would need to be re-enrolled with a different user account at some point in the future. You can wipe the device, which means that you'll remove all of its contents, like a factory reset. You can simply delete it from the context and remove company data from it. You can perform a remote lock. You can synchronize. Now, synchronization, as we know, occurs on a periodic basis, typically every 8 hours once it's done the initial synchronization. But you can force that. That's particularly relevant if you've made a couple of configuration changes, you want to see the effect of them. My top tip here, though, is don't be too impatient, because in its nature, I don't want to say that Intune is slow. That's not accurate and not fair. I think it's a cloud-based system, and it has a process that it goes through. And it can take sometimes an extended period for things to appear to have worked. And so us trying to expedite them by refreshing and synchronizing doesn't always produce the intended result. So I would just do as you do with group policy in an on-prem network. You plan a change, you make a change, you leave the system to settle down and percolate through, then you review the settings. You don't sit there trying to force synchronization between domain controllers and forcing sysvol synchronization and then going to clients and doing GP update force and so on. You do in a training course, but you don't in the real world, and nor should you with Intune. So yeah, sure, if you've got a significant change you want to test, then sync. But otherwise, just wait for the natural synchronization, which is typically every 8 hours. Reset the passcode, restart the device, and collect diagnostics. And you can also perform a fresh start of the machine to make it available for another user. If it's an autopilot device, you can do an autopilot reset, which is similar. You can perform antivirus scans of a variety of different types. You can update Windows Defender patterns. You can perform a BitLocker key rotation. You can rename the device. If configured, and it's not in the screenshot on the right-hand side, if you know that you've enabled remote help, you can establish a new remote assistance session. And also helpful, if you've lost the device, you can locate it. In the demonstration, I'm just going to go through a quick review of device inventory reports and some of the management options of enrolled devices. So I'm in the All Devices node at the moment, and from here I can give myself a bit more working room here. I can specify if I want to use any specific columns that are missing. I might want to select device action or device state or primary user email address, enrollment date. If it's a phone, I might want to expose its IMEI number. I might want to indicate if it's in a particular category, and so on. So a range of different columns that can be enabled. I'll apply that. They may not necessarily all fit on the screen, but if I scroll across, you can see them. So most of these are unassigned, but Alex was kind enough to assign his device as a phone. And in fact, it looks like he's correct because it's an iOS device running iOS 15.7. So it probably is an iPhone. But nevertheless, it's a requirement of Alex to specify the category when they enroll the device. And as I said before, it's not always the case that users are accurate about that. When I want to export the devices or the information in the devices list here, I can choose the option for export, and then I can include selected columns, or I can include all inventory data. So the selected columns are the ones I've got displayed here. All would be including all the columns I haven't yet selected, but they would also be included in the report. So let's just click back from here and say, okay, well, before I do that, I also want to filter. I've only got 4 devices, so that's really not going to be a big deal for me, but I can choose from devices managed by Intune, for example, and or Configuration Manager. That's pretty relevant, but you may have other solutions. The device actions I might be interested in finding out about. Have I done any of these wipe actions? Have there been any failed wipes or wipe pendings? So I can choose those. Categories, again, I can select all categories or specific categories, remembering the caveat that may not be that indicative. Ownership, compliance state, jailbroken, operating system, and last check-in values. So if I want, I can reset all those, which I will, and I won't bother to filter. But you can see that in a large amount of information, large quantity of devices listed here, that can be extremely beneficial. You're looking for a specific thing. Oh, there's no need for me to export that file really, but what else can I do? Well, from here, I can perform individual actions on devices, and it really does depend on what the device is and what its current state is as to what's available. It's maybe worth the exam you going through the options that appear here, in this case for a phone, and then seeing the options that you have. You can see that these are, or you will see in a moment, that these are slightly different than you get on a Windows device. Okay, so if I go back to all devices and choose a Windows device, the options available are different. That's because it's a different operating system, and so different things are possible. But it's worth being familiar with those for the test, answer questions that relate to performing these device actions. If I want to perform the same action on multiple devices, a very convenient way of doing it is to select bulk device actions, then select the operating system, iOS, iPadOS, select the action that I want, and you can choose. You can see that they're different depending on which operating system. So were I to choose Windows, I'd have potentially different options, like autopilot reset is not a thing for iOS, obviously. So I'll choose iOS, and then I can choose to do a restart, and then say next, and then select a particular device that I want to include. It should find a device. I know I've got one running iOS, but for some reason it's not picking it up. I don't know why. Well, not to worry. Let's see if I can choose a Windows one, see if that will work. Select device action, sync. Select devices to include. Okay, that's working okay. I don't know why it wouldn't pick up the other one, and then that one as well. Click select, and then next, and then I can go off and perform that task. Again, I'm not going to do that, but it's a convenient mechanism if you've got a large number of actions that you want to perform across devices. In the demonstration, you learned how to generate a custom device inventory report and how to manage enrolled devices.